This program is proudly brought to you by Daytech PNG Limited and Telecom Limited.
Good evening, viewers. I'm Malcolm Wyra, and welcome to this special one-hour edition of Infocus. We are here at the 8th Pacific Tuna Forum, hosted here at the Stanley Hotel. We begin our discussions with our interview with the Managing Director for the National Fisheries Authority, Mr. Justin Ilakini. Welcome to Infocus. In this first session, we are joined by the Managing Director for the National Fisheries Authority, Mr. Justin Ilakini. Mr. Ilakini, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Okay. Firstly, can you just give us a brief background on the core mandate of the National Fisheries Authority in Papua New Guinea?
The National Fisheries Authority is the lead government agency in terms of managing the fisheries and marine resources in the country. It also plays the role of regulating the fishery, especially with regards to all the fisheries of commercial interest to the state. And it also plays a role of implementing important government policies of the government insofar as ensuring that the fishery in Papua New Guinea is managed on a sustainable basis for the long-term benefit of our people.
Now, we are currently here at the 8th Pacific Tuna Forum. Can you just give us a background on the key themes of this forum?
Important thing that people should understand about why we have brought this forum, the Pacific Tuna Forum, to Port Moresby is the fact that in our region we contribute over or close to 60% of the supply of tuna to the world. And similar forums such as this have been held in other places, such as Thailand in Bangkok, in General Santos in Philippines, and elsewhere. But those places are not the major supplier of the raw material or tuna. And as a member to the Infocus, we made a proposal to the Governing Council of that organization that it is only right to bring such an important conference to where the source of the supply is. So we managed to bring the conference to Port Moresby, and we've been doing it for the last 8 conferences now. Today, this week is the 8th, and it's right here in the heart of the Pacific, as people would like to call it. I think it makes sense that we should hold this sort of event where the resources is, the tuna resource is caught. So that's the main reason why we brought the conference here, so that the attention of the world will be on the Pacific, will be on Papua New Guinea, where this important resource that feeds the world can be given that attention that it deserves.
You mentioned that Papua New Guinea is a member of the Infocus. Can you give us an idea of what this particular group is?
Yeah, Infocus is a semi sort of a government organization as part of the FAO, and it is based in Malaysia. It's basically an organization that promotes trade, market on behalf of its members. And the membership of that organization comprises countries like Iraq, Iran, Philippines, Malaysia, mostly the Southeast Asian countries, and in the Pacific, it's only Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and Fiji that comprise the membership of Infocus, which is a sort of a sub entity or sub organization of the bigger FAO.
You mentioned market access, which is a very important aspect of tuna trade in the world. What interventions is the National Fisheries Authority implementing in its core activities to improve access to market?
In terms of market access, we have successfully secured market access for the European market for canned tuna. And I mean, we did that 20 years ago. And having market access to the EU and having duty-free, quota-free access or preferential market access, that alone was the impetus to drive growth in the tuna processing sector in Papua New Guinea. And as a result, on the back of that market access, the success of securing that market access, you can see how that has triggered growth over the last 15 or 20 years for our tuna industry in PNG. So as far as the tuna industry is concerned, market access into the EU, which is the biggest canned tuna market in the world, has triggered and supported growth of our industry up to today. And today you can see, as a result of that, you can see that we have 6 tuna processing plants in the country. And there is opportunity and potential to have more. And insofar as market for canned tuna is concerned, we've done that successfully. Apart from other fisheries and marine resources, we have secured market access for China. And we are taking a similar approach like what we did for the EU market. But this time, as we work at opening up a Chinese market for our non-tuna products, we see that it will have similar impact in triggering growth in the non-tuna sectors like coastal fisheries, aquaculture and inland fisheries. Because China is a massive market, it takes almost everything. So far, we are working closely with the China General Customs Authority in China. We registered a good number of our exporters already, and they've got export permits to export into China, where China is going to receive almost all our fisheries and marine products. But the thing here is that we have to also make sure that it's one thing to have market access or sign market access protocols. It's another thing to make sure that the products that you land into that market is profitable. So we are working with our trade office to make sure to look at opportunities to also consider and negotiate free trade agreement with China. And I think our trade office and foreign affairs is working on that one. So once we get that done, I believe that it's going to have similar effect like what we achieved for the EU market for tuna. And I think China market is very critical for our people because the resources that they will be handling for the Chinese market, it's right at their doorstep. It's at their fingertips. So that's going to be exciting when the Chinese market opens up for our people.
Are there other key reforms will the NFA be embarking on in the next coming years?
Yes, we are embarking on reforms in response to government, specific government directives, policy directives. One of which is the commercialization agenda of government, where the Prime Minister has challenged all the economic sectors to contribute to a 200 billion kina economy by 2030. So, and also I think also in line with the Take Back Papua New Guinea and Leave No Child Behind. So we are being directed by those high-level aspirations of the government and the Prime Minister, and we've repositioned ourselves by coming up with a 10-year roadmap. We call the National Fisheries Strategic Plan, 2021 to 2030. And we've also, guided by that plan, we also are rolling out some reforms in terms of looking at reviewing our legislation so that we can tap into the commercial space. Like right now in my introduction, I said that the NFA is a regulatory organization. We don't make money. We don't go into commercial businesses and all that. But with the challenge that was relayed to all economic sectors, including fisheries, we saw that we will need to look at limiting legislation and policies that would constrain us to effectively implement the directive. So we have stepped into the commercial space to look at how we can capitalize on important assets in the fisheries, like tuna and other commercial species. So that's an important reform that we are rolling out. And we are looking at our legislation. We are looking at how we can set up another body or entity that can drive that agenda for and on behalf of government. At the same time, we also looking at initiatives to broaden the sector, meaning that the sector should not only be dependent on tuna. Tuna, as you might know, is the largest and the most valuable fisheries resources that the country has. But if you really look at it, most of people are not directly involved in the tuna sector. It's mostly commercial. It's mostly, it's an intensive capital intensive sector. So you wouldn't see a lot of people involved in tuna. But the fisheries that all our people are involved in are the non-tuna subsectors, like aquaculture, like coastal fisheries, inland fisheries, and all that, lobster, crab, mud crabs, reef fish, and all that. So we are rolling out in a big way to broaden the sector in partnership with provincial governments to empower our people to get into fisheries.
Mr. Yarakini, thank you for joining us.
It has been my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Welcome back to Infocus. In this session, we are joined by Ms. Ria Mos Christian, Executive Director for the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission. Ria, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Firstly, can you give us a brief background of the Commission?
Sure. So the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, or WCPFC, is one of 5 global tuna management organizations responsible for the coordination of fisheries management, specifically tuna fisheries. And the WCPFC manages the world's largest tuna fishery.
Are you able to highlight us the key specific tuna species that are endemic to the Pacific region?
Yes, so the WCPFC manages 6 key tuna stocks, skipjack tuna, yellowfin, big eye, albacore, both North Pacific and South Pacific albacore, and the Pacific bluefin tuna.
How much does the tuna industry contribute to the Pacific regional economy?
The latest estimates of economic value to the region are around $6 billion, US dollars.
So sustainability is a very a critical aspect for the tuna industry moving forward. So can you highlight for us some of the key initiatives or measures that are implemented to ensure sustainability of tuna stocks?
The WCPFC is looking at the fishing activities in the region undertaken by purse seine vessels and longline vessels, and managing both by the effort, so the number of days that vessels are operating, and also by catch, so the amount of catch that vessels are taking from the waters. Those are the 2 main management tools that the Commission uses. And then it employs a combination of other tools like closures around the use of what are called fish aggregating devices, or FADs. And it also implements a number of monitoring tools like vessel monitoring systems and inspection protocols to ensure that vessels are behaving according to the rules and that they're not taking more fish than is available.
Surveillance is a very critical element for governing bodies within the Pacific, especially when it comes to tuna and other fisheries products. So are there specific surveillance program implemented by your commission?
The Commission has in place what is called a high seas boarding and inspection scheme to manage the fishing activities, or to undertake inspections on the high seas in the convention area in the region. Each of the member countries that are situated in the region, the Pacific Island countries, also have their own patrol programs. And there's a lot of cooperation and support coming from partners like Australia, France, and the United States.
I would imagine capacity in terms of the inspection crew and the inspection team, it would be a challenge at times. So have there been support from your organization as well as you mentioned, Australia and New Zealand?
Our organization, the WCPFC, coordinates the inspections or the monitoring by setting the standards and the rules for members to implement at national level. So the organization itself doesn't manage assets or surveillance assets. What it does is it coordinates the standards and the rules by which inspection is to take place.
What are some major challenges that are confronting your organization's operations?
Broadly, the biggest challenges have to do with illegal and unregulated, unreported fishing that is still occurring in the region. The gaps have closed on IUU fishing, but there are still pockets where there is not enough information or not enough eyes on the water to see the activities that are taking place. The other big challenge that the Commission is facing right now has to do with climate change and the way climate change is impacting the movement of the stocks and how management is going to be adaptive to that.
What role do you see for the private sector? For instance, the fishing industry and the companies that engage in the fishing industry. What role do you see for them to improve the sustainability as well as the governance outcomes within the Pacific region?
In a lot of ways, the fishing industry is really leading on sustainability initiatives in both the certification schemes and the certification programs that they're engaged in, and ensuring that fish is taken according to real high standards. And also in their work with retailers and consumers and ensuring that there's transparency and traceability.
Ms. Ria Moss-Christian, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to Infocus. In this session, we are joined by Atelaite Rokosuka, Permanent Secretary for the Fisheries Sector at the Republic of Fiji. Atelaite, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Firstly, can you just give us a brief background on the role that your secretary plays at the Fiji government?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And yes, I am Atelaite Rokosuka from the Ministry of Fisheries and Forestry in the Republic of Fiji. Yes, my role involves, I'm actually the Chief Operations Officer for the Ministry of Fisheries and Forestry. I provide policy advice, high policy advice to the Honorable Minister for Fisheries and Forestry. And in terms of finances, in terms of the entire operations, that is what my role entails. And I also look after two very important sectors in Fiji, and that is the fisheries sector, of which tuna is part of, as well as the forestry sector, which looks after all the loggers, all the contractors, and also the resource owners per se.
How much does the tuna industry contribute to the Fijian economy?
Thank you very much. With regards to the contribution of tuna, I mean, the contribution of fisheries, the fisheries sector alone is about 0.6 to around 0.8% of the total GDP. It has been staggering around that value for quite a while now. But I would say that fisheries, among all the sectors in Fiji, that was the only sector that was actually increasing in its operation during the COVID pandemic. And there are forecasted growth in this sector, though it's still sitting around that percentage.
It's good you mentioned the COVID pandemic. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the fragility of supply chain systems. So what reforms is your ministry undertaking to ensure that there is resilience within the Fijian fisheries sector?
With regards to I mean, as I've said already, the fisheries sector in Fiji is a resilient one. It bounces back after COVID-19. There are quite some, there's a lot of reforms that is currently happening now. As you're aware, we have the current government, and the current government comes with its mandate, and the ministry is actually looking into that as we speak. One of the main drivers, or one of the main programs that we are looking at, is actually to provide that enabling environment for the private sector and the public sector to work together. And a key initiative to that is to firstly look at our legislative and policy framework. I mean, the laws range back to 1940s, and there is a need for us to review that as soon as possible so that we can provide that conducive and enabling environment to all our key stakeholders in the sector.
As with every resource industry, it is critical that we encourage downstream processing. The Pacific has been known particularly for exporting raw tuna stock to international markets. What reforms will the Fijian government be pursuing to ensure that we process fish stocks in Fiji itself?
Probably it would be best, and just for a better understanding, for me to give you a quick snapshot of what the industry is about, or all about in Fiji. In Fiji, we have about 6 processors in terms of fish processing companies, and we have 2 canneries in Fiji. Yeah, so in terms of reforms that we're currently doing, we are looking into assisting our industry with their issues. We are looking into upgrading certain infrastructure, and we are also reaching out to our Pacific Island countries as well as our bilateral partners to support us with regards to fish supply, which is one of the major probably a setback for us with regards to our cannery, one of our government cannery in Fiji, which is the Livuka PEFCO company, which is currently experiencing shortage in supplies. So, I mean, all in all, the current government is actually looking, through the ministry, is looking into finding all possible ways and means to ensure that we entice fishing vessels to land their catches as well as process it before it is re-exported or exported back, exported to other countries in the Pacific or abroad to our US markets, EU and Japan.
Ate Laite Rokosuka, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so very much.
Welcome back to Infocus. In this session, we are joined by Mr. Phil Roberts, Board Director for Trimarine and Chair of the 8th Pacific Tuna Forum currently held here in Port Moresby. Phil, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Firstly, can you give us a brief background of the Tuna Forum?
Well, this is the 8th Tuna Forum. I think I've been to nearly every one of them. I honestly don't remember where the first one was, but many of them have been held here in Port Moresby. It's something that the Papua New Guinea governments and through NFA have always been very supportive of. Infocus is the organiser. They are an organisation based in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. They also host the biannual tuna conference in Bangkok, which is more of a global get-together. But this Pacific Forum was designed to focus on the Pacific, particularly the Western Pacific fishery, tuna fishery. And I think it's proved to be very successful over the years. You know, particularly this time, the quality of the presentations we've listened to this morning and yesterday were really excellent and very informative. So it's something that's actually growing in reputation, if you like. Right?
The theme for this year's 8th Tuna Forum is strengthening tuna sustainability and industry development in the Blue Pacific continent through increased innovation, participation and partnerships. Can you give us a perspective on this?
Well, sustainability is something that is not only close to our hearts as producers of tuna, and Trimarine is a catcher, a processor, a marketer of tuna, but we always take the view that if we don't have sustainability, we don't have a business, because if the tuna aren't there, we're all out of a job, basically. So sustainability is an existential issue for us, as it is for all the communities and the people that rely on tuna to make their livings. So it's tremendously important. I know in PNG the tuna industry is important, but it's a very small part of your GDP because you're such a rich country in terms of natural wealth. But in some other island countries in the Pacific, tuna is far more important because they have few other alternative sources of income. So, and some of those sources are not renewables, for instance, trees, logging and so on. Whereas tuna is a renewable resource which can be there for forever if we manage it correctly. And more consumers of tuna in the marketplaces of Europe, the USA, even in the Middle East, they're demanding sustainability. When they eat a can of tuna, they want to know that it's been produced sustainably. Not only sustainably from a biological point of view, in other words, that there'll be tuna there next year, but they also want to know that it's socially sustainable, that people haven't been exploited, badly treated, there's no modern slavery involved in the production or capture of those tunas. These are really important issues from a marketing perspective, and hence the focus this time on sustainability. And when the program says sustainability, it means sustainability in all of its aspects, not just the biological sustainability of the resource, but the social sustainability, and also nowadays the environmental sustainability and aspects, particularly issues like carbon footprint. We have to be conscious of how much carbon we're emitting in the process of catching and processing and transporting all this tuna. These are the really salient issues today in our tuna industry. Right?
Finally, what are some key points, key takeaway points from this 8th Tuna Forum?
Well, one thing that's been echoing throughout yesterday and today is sustainability, which we've already mentioned. And the other issue is IUU fishing, right? Illegal, unreported, unlicensed fishing, which is still happening. Now, according to FFA, and I'm sure they've done a very good survey, it's actually reducing significantly, but it's still a very significant factor. Island countries are losing a lot of revenue. They're losing a lot of fish through IUU fishing. And the interesting thing that came out yesterday is it's not so much unlicensed boats poaching, fishing like that anymore. It's actually a case of licensed boats that aren't reporting properly. And that's much harder to detect. You have very modern systems nowadays for checking where boats are. You can use satellites, you can use spotter planes. You can spot a boat and it's easy to see whether it has a license or not. But you can't tell so easily if it's licensed, whether it's actually reporting 100% of its catch properly. So those are the two things that have really come out in the course of yesterday and this morning. The other issue that's come to the forefront is marketing, and the fact that as tuna, industry needs to innovate more. We need to produce more diverse types of product instead of just the can that's been produced for the last, 80 years or 100 years or however long it is that we all recognize on the supermarket shelf. We have to produce much more innovative products that are much more appealing, particularly to young people, people who don't want to take it home and cook it, people who want to eat on the move, plastic bowls with transparent tops and meal kits, all sorts of different products. And there have been some examples there shown on the presentations. But as an industry, we need to add value to tuna, because today tuna, frankly, is too cheap. Even though the price in Bangkok, the commodity price, is relatively high today, it's still too cheap. And why do I say that? Because a can of tuna in a place like the US, which is a huge market, sells for $1 a can. If you go to the US and go to Starbucks and buy a cup of coffee, how much does it cost? $5, $6? How can a can of tuna that had to be captured, processed, transported, marketed, all the whole supply chain, how can it be 1/6 of the price of a cup of coffee? It doesn't make sense, does it? That cup of coffee has been marketed very effectively, Credit to the coffee marketers, right? But we need to do something similar with tuna, right? We've got to create more value, and the value will flow back to everybody in the supply chain, including the countries that own the resources. They can increase access fees if boat owners are getting paid more money for their tuna.
Mr. Phil Roberts, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Welcome back to Infocus. In this session, we are joined by Dr. Manu Tupou Rosen, FFA Director General. Dr. Manu, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. It's an honor to join you.
Firstly, can you give us a brief background of the organization you work for?
The Pacific Islands Forum Fisheries Agency, also known as FFA, was established by our forum leaders over 40 years ago. In fact, the decision that led to the establishment of the organization was made here in Papua New Guinea. It continues to show the strong leadership of Papua New Guinea in our region. So FFA is set up to provide advice on conservation and management to its 17 member countries, which includes Papua New Guinea.
A very pertinent aspect of the theme for this year's 8th Pacific Tuna Forum is the innovative in technology sense as well as the policy side as well. So what sort of examples can you give around the innovative approaches by regional bodies like yourself?
So Malcolm, we've been really privileged, the FFA membership, with support from the Secretariat, for support also from the Pacific Islands Forum and SPC, to have been invited to Kokopo for the East New Britain initiative that has been led by the Honourable Jelta Wong and supported by the NFA and Managing Director Justin Ilakini and his team. And the meeting in Kokopo highlighted one of those innovations that you talk about, and it's to do with establishing a regional processing hub and having neighboring countries, also known as spoke countries, who can enter into mutually beneficial partnerships with the hub country in processing tuna or any other types of associated benefits. And in doing that, for example, a neighboring country could prioritize that is the hub or the location, channel their raw supply of tuna. Not all countries can be hub countries. And so there's key roles within our membership where some in prioritized areas, you know, it needs access to electricity, access to good transport, those types of things to be a candidate for a hub. And Papua New Guinea is obviously a clear candidate. And then identifying those countries who can channel their raw supply through here. They cannot establish their own hub in their own countries, but can indeed still enter into that partnership and bring their raw supply here in a way where they both benefit. So the regional processing hub, the initiative, and the leadership from Papua New Guinea, that's one of the ways in which it's innovative for the region. And the other one, if I could highlight, please, Malcolm, is the opportunity to develop our sector. Recently, FFA completed a value chain study, and in that study, it looks across the whole value chain for the tuna fisheries, and it can identify in there several entry points for our member countries. And so one of the tasks for FFA is unpacking that to see where realistically, with the capability each of our members have, they can enter into that value chain, and making sure that we fully utilize the tuna. At the moment, for the tuna, only 30% is used for food, but there are opportunities, for example, partnering with pharmaceutical companies, seeing how products or elements of the fish can be further utilized. And those are areas we're really excited to step into. So those are some of the innovation that the region continues to look into.
Dr. Manu Tupou Rosen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Malcolm, and really appreciate this opportunity.
Welcome, viewers, to this edition of Infocus. In this session, we are joined by Dr. Philemon Manoni, Commissioner for the Pacific Oceans Commission, and Mr. Penny Suvanikama, Oceans Analyst at the Pacific Oceans Commission. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Firstly, Dr. Philemon, can you give us a background on the Pacific Oceans Commission?
Pacific Oceans Commission office was an office that was recommended for establishment and endorsed by leaders in 2010. And then a few years later, operationalized through the setting up of the office, the appointment of a Pacific Oceans Commissioner, In the past, the role had always been vested with the Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum. But at their meeting in February this year, the leaders decided to appoint a separate Pacific Oceans Commissioner, and I was fortunate enough to get that appointment. And now I have started the work with Penny and the office in Suva, Fiji.
Are there key regional agreements that will be implemented or enforced through your organization?
Yes, so part of the role of the, or a big part of the role of the Pacific Oceans Commissioner's Office is to look at coordination across the different oceans initiatives in the region. And at the region at this time, there are a number of important instruments and regional conventions that we will certainly be also looking at to see how the different sectors, stakeholders playing a role that all contribute to the health and the resilience of our oceans.
Penny, the sustainability of tuna stocks in the Pacific is an issue that's very much a very pertinent issue. We're currently here at the 8th Pacific Tuna Forum. In what capacity will your organization be attending to ensuring that the sustainability of fish stocks ensured in the Pacific?
Thank you very much. Just on it's very important for us to be, and the Commissioner, to be here at this 8th Tuna Forum. I guess as Commissioner has mentioned, the ocean in totality is an important issue for us in the Pacific. Of course, tuna is one of the most important resources. There are regional and global frameworks that sort of govern the standards of how the tuna stocks needs to be managed. And I think the Pacific, of course, is is very proud of the fact that it has the healthiest fish stocks in the world, and I think the Pacific is at the forefront, leading the world on that side of things. And I think our role, of course, is to sensitize the fisheries conferences and discussions about the global frameworks when they are being implemented, sort of like what sort of standards the global commitments our leaders have committed to, and what are sort of the regional. So I think the role of the Commissioner is just putting in place those policies.
The blue economy is an emerging trend in the world these days. What opportunities does it present for small island developing countries like the Pacific Islands?
Very good question. I think after so many years of so many generations and centuries of living off the oceans as peoples of the Pacific, it is time to innovate, I suppose, and to look at how we can leverage off in terms of economic development from the oceans. I mean, the underlying purpose for all of these conservation and management measures is that we have a healthy ocean for a reason. I think there is no contradiction between conservation and management and sustainable use of our oceans. I think there is a case to make that whilst we take effective measures to ensure that the health of the oceans is maintained, that we can also participate meaningfully in the different aspects of the blue economy, and in many forms, in fisheries, in energy, etc. So there is a whole vast area of unexplored options. So part of the work that Penny and I are looking at is to explore that a little bit and get some capacity to the office to sort of assist in how we do that.
Another very alarming threat to the Pacific Ocean, which will affect not only tuna stocks, but also the environmental conditions of the Pacific Ocean. This is the controversial discharge of wastewater from the Fukushima power station. What measures have been deployed to ensure the safety of sovereign nations within the Pacific, the safety of the waters?
Very good question. I mean, as you might have heard, that the forum initially had been working closely with TEPCO and the Japan Nuclear Authority to see where there can be some meeting of the mind about the proposal to discharge. I am concerned, but we are beyond that point now, noting that the IAEA report that came out in July had basically paved the way for Japan to begin the discharge, and they have begun the discharge. But all is not lost yet. I think we can still hold Japan to account in terms of the monitoring of the discharge. And I understand that the IAEA has committed to be on the ground as well to continue to monitor the discharge. But I think there needs to be a strategy to that, and I hope that when leaders meet this year in Rarotonga, that we will have a clear strategy forward after the discharge has commenced in Japan.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Well, viewers, that concludes our one-hour special edition of Infocus featuring the 8th Pacific Tuna Forum. From all of us here, good night.
This program was proudly brought to you by Daytech PNG Limited and Telecom Limited.